Troy Hightower, Bob Snoddy,
Here.
I think we shared the three.
David Ayers,
Like, more than one pager with the group.
Jane Strawn,
It did go into.
John Palmer, Hank Fung,
Here.
Krista Silva, Yolanda Shepard, Alvin Adam, Julio Valadez, Steve Cohn,
Here.
Caitlin Roeder Sutter, Espe Velma, David Lehman, Elizabeth Klass, Walter Stamer Jr., Troy Hoslesher, Sam Daly, John Webb, Patricia A. Lynn,
Here.
Wonderful. Welcome, everyone, to the Rail Committee meeting. We're glad for those of you who are here and those of you who are online. Is everyone able to hear us okay online? Are there any issues with audio?
We
All
can
right.
hear you.
Wonderful.
Sound is great. Yeah.
Okay, great. Item 2, public comment. Are there any public comments? Oh, safety briefing.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. That's not on my agenda.
Safety briefings as we're all here.
Yeah.
So just so everyone's aware, we are at 949 East Channel Street in Stockton, California. For those of us who are in this room, there is an AED located like in the lobby. Is there anyone in the room who's first aid certified? Oh, Nathan's gonna save us all. Perfect.
Thank you, Nathan.
There's also a fire extinguisher out the door. There's no drill scheduled for today, so if we do hear an alarm, we are going to exit this room. We're gonna go through these doors here, and we're going to congregate out here on the platform in the backside of the canopy. There are 12 of us in the room, so we'll make sure to count one another, make sure that we've all made it. Renee will call 911 if we need to do that, and we're going to designate Nathan to run get the emergency equipment if needed. And then we already talked about the evacuation plan. Just be aware of our surroundings, whether you're in this room or whether you're remote, be aware of your surroundings. If you have any special needs, please put those special needs, you have a DNR or some other medical instructions in your left shoe or your left front pocket. And if there is an active shooter situation, we will try to barricade and shelter in place here. If not, we'll try to flee. And the last resort will be, we will fight to the death. Okay. So with that, let's all stay safe today and look out for one another.
Thank you so much. All right, now, is there any other things that I know before I go back to the agenda?
No.
All right, okay. All right, item 2, public comment. Are there any public comments here today?
And Chair, we did not receive any public comments in advance of the meeting.
Thank you. Item 3, update on Valley Rail passenger experience.
Awesome. Okay, so if you go to the next slide. So as the Valley Rail program, and for just as a review, is the expansion of both ACE and San Joaquin's service together. As the program itself progresses, there are several projects that are related to the program that involve passenger experience. And really the intention of both the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority as well as the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission is that we would move both of the services to a place where there would be a unified passenger experience. As we're going to share stations in the future, as we're going to share passengers in the future, we want the Valley Rail program and service associated with it to feel like a seamless experience. And so the idea is if you want to take a train from Modesto to Natomas in the morning, well, you should be able to choose whether you want to take ACE or the San Joaquins, and on your return journey, you should have the flexibility to do that as well. Well, as you sort of think through like how to actually accomplish that, in reality, really do have to recognize that currently today, the ACE and the San Joaquin services have some areas of dissimilarity, right? One is a commuter rail service, one is a intercity passenger rail service. We do things differently for each of those services. So we've been identifying some of those areas of dissimilarity and then planning projects that sort of help us get to this unified structure. Go to the next slide. Some of the areas that we've identified so far, though there probably are more that we will continue to identify. One of them is signage and wayfinding. So we have completely different signage and wayfinding programs across both of the services. The signs look different, the directions look different. They're also a bit inconsistent. Ticketing and fare collection. You buy your ACE ticket in one way, you buy your San Joaquin ticket completely different way. And the thing that drives those ticketing and fare collection systems are the fare policies, and the programs themselves are actually quite different as well. There's other things like customer service, customer retention and loyalty. The way that we handle some of those things are different. So we're working through sort of these areas of dissimilarity, but today we're going to provide an update on a station signage and wayfinding plan project that is underway, as well as a ticketing integration project that is underway as well, to sort of really tackle some of these areas of dissimilarity. You go to the next slide. So first, we're going to talk about signage and wayfinding. So in January, a contract was approved with a consultant named Perkins Eastman to address the need for a unified signage and wayfinding plan. And the project is actually addressing both current as well as future stations. So the program is not only envisioning, well, how would we adjust the signage and wayfinding app, like the station that we're sitting in today and all the other stations within the corridor, but also providing plans for Valley Rail and how signage will be placed within the new stations that are being constructed. And really, as we sort of think through that, have a really focus on different types of passengers that visit our stations. So a variety of passengers from a business traveler to a leisure traveler to a student to someone who needs assistance, like really making sure that the signage and wayfinding is planned for them, as well as, well, how do you know what services are available at those stations as well? As we share stations, as we new stations come online, does that station have a service and San Joaquin service, just a service, just San Joaquin service? How do you really work that out? Go to the next slide. This is the milestones of the project itself. So we started with a signage audit. So actually every single station in both the ACE and the San Joaquin corridor was visited, and a comprehensive set of pictures was taken to really catalog all of the current signs. We've gone through a recommendations report process where we're really envisioning, well, what do we want in a future signage and wayfinding program? And then that data is then being fed into what will be a signage manual that will actually give us the blueprint on how to accomplish this in the real world at our stations. And it also includes one of the things that the Valley Rail program, that's driving the design of the Valley Rail program for the different design teams, is a criteria manual that they use to make sure that all of the stations are designed to the spec of the agencies. And so one of the chapters that will be updated as a part of this project is the one related to signage and wayfinding, which is really just a skeleton right now, and it's waiting sort of the completion of this project. Go to the next slide. So this is like sort of what we have been doing. We have like gone out and really taken a picture of every single sign that's at the station. This is an A station. This is the Pleasanton station. You can see the little dots on the map are all of the signs that are present at that location. They're all geolocated. So if the maintenance team ever needed to go, well, what signs are at all the stations, they can actually pick and use them. A picture will be called up just like this. The next slide. That's all being fed into a database that we will have utility of, like ongoing, where you'll know exactly where a sign is located, the status of that sign, whether it needs to be updated, whether it's just okay, like as it is. And then this will be a way that we can keep track of the inventory going forward as well. To the next slide. When we start really thinking about the work of new signs and new wayfinding elements, really sort of broke up the station into really moments for the passenger. So that passenger arriving at the station, experiencing sort of the beginning parts, the plaza areas and the amenity areas of the station, moving into the circulation. So there's not a lot of circulation that happens within most of our current stations, right? It's like a a walkway to a platform, but in the newer stations, there are elevators and tunnels, and so really understanding what those signs and wayfinding needs are. And then obviously the platform itself has its own needs, and really trying to address what a passenger needs at each of those moments in their journey, and making sure that we plan those moments in a way that helps them know that like they've gone to the right place, and that they know the policies and things that they're supposed to do and not supposed to do, you know, things like that. Go to the next slide. So this is just an example of the arrival zone. It's actually already changed from this slide being created, but you can see here, so we're really planning on not like the different signage types that would be present in that moment of the passenger journey, and also some of the scale of those signs and how they would be utilized within the station area. So we'll take this and then actually fill those signs with the content is really what the manual process that is planned to do. The next slide. So right now, the next steps for this project is that we're continuing to review the current sign inventory and identifying those ones that need to be replaced and updated. We're finalizing those recommendations and making sure that we're clear. Like one of the things that you'll see in the new signs is there's a lot of use of symbols. So for people who don't speak English or English and Spanish, which many signs will also have Spanish, a way for them to utilize the signage in a way that's sort of multilingual. But those, like, we got to decide, well, what is the symbol we're going to use? And so we're kind of going through that process now. Then the signage manual will be created, and then that manual will be adopted by both the JPA and the Rail Commission boards, as well as actually the facilities committee. So we're going to have 3 actions to do like in a row. And then we'll update that criteria chapter, as I mentioned, for the Valley Rail stations. The next slide. But before I talk about ticketing, is there any questions on this project?
Are there any questions? Yeah.
I have a question. So when you talked about doing the tracking the inventory and that they would be updated, what is the process for that? And then the other question is, in order to, I guess, update things, or if people wanted more information, is there a QR code on any of the signs that can give additional information?
Yeah, so so we actually identified in the budget for this fiscal year money to actually take the manual and apply it to the stations. We anticipate that there'll probably be a phase process. We probably can't do all of the 18 stations for the San Joaquins and all of the 9 stations for ACE in 1 year. So we're going to kind of break it up over the course of the next several years, identify funding, procure the signs, and then install them as the standards would then indicate. So that's sort of the plan. And then in terms of content on the signs, we do utilize QR codes today for people to get deeper information about different elements, but the content of the slides is really the work of the manual process itself. And so we're really just beginning sort of the content portion of the individual signs right now.
Okay, yeah, I guess just to follow up on that, in terms of the tracking and inventory, I was thinking maybe as you go through and everything put in new, but then let's say something's not readable or understandable, is there a place where then the customer can if there's a QR code or something of that nature, that they can click on that and then they can give you all feedback, so that it doesn't always have to be the maintenance crew. It's kind of like that situation when you're in the bathroom and they say, if it needs maintenance, call this number or let us know. I was just thinking something along those lines to help facilitate the work for you to do that, because it seems like it would be a lot in terms of upkeep, and then that would integrate the customer experience to say, oh, I can't see this, or there's something wrong with it, or what have you.
I really take that into consideration, as we also have groups that visit stations to do kind of audits of the passenger experience, and maybe that be one way in which that could be augmented. So we'll take that.
Thank you. Any other questions? And online, are there any questions? I do have one car. I really appreciate the idea of transitional signage. to move from one space to the next. I just went to New York City and we transitioned from JFK to the rail to get to then the Long Island Rail. And so those transitional signs were really important, getting us through actually 3 systems within a very short amount of time. So I guess one thing, and you talked about audits moving forward, that would be in future budgets, but I would appreciate the knowledge of how you are making sure that there's some evaluative tools to make sure that the transitional signs are actually working in future budgets.
Yeah, so I think that one of the aspects of the project, I think that helped sort of as a backstop to that concern is the team is made up of signage and wayfinding experts that have worked on a variety of projects like outside of just this one, including actually many of them are out of New York who had experience working in very complex environments, much more complex than maybe our environment. But we also perform on a biannual basis, like a passenger survey. And one of the questions we have is around like passenger experience at the station itself, where they can give us feedback. Oh yeah, it was terrible, right? Like I couldn't find my way. And then we take that feedback very seriously, and then we'll definitely make adjustments in the future.
Without any other questions, we'll move on to ticketing.
Sure. Next, go to the next slide. So one of the challenges is, as I mentioned before, in terms of dissimilarity, is this sort of difference between how you buy an ACE ticket today and how you buy a San Joaquin ticket today. Completely different systems, different apps, different backends, different rules. And then this project is a bit complex. For one reason, ACE really needed a new ticketing system for itself. And so I know that we don't necessarily talk about ACE all the time in this group, but ACE had an older ticketing system that they launched an app, but we're really still selling. Oh, wait a second. Right. Well, take a drink of water. You want to do that? Sure. But ACE continued to sell tickets, like paper tickets in the station. So you could go out to the counter here and they would sell you a paper ticket that you need to put into like a mechanical validator that stamps it with the date. And those mechanical validators that help the fare enforcement process are way past their end of life, and they are like the maintenance team are like on life support. It's like Frankenstein, right? Like they're really trying to keep them up. But so we broke this project up into 2 phases. The first phase was for ACE to receive a new ticketing system that updated its processes and really combined some of those processes into one unified ticketing platform. And then we have started, and we'll discuss these components in the subsequent slides, but then we started a planning process around the San Joaquins, as well as future high-speed rail integration, and what the needs of those more complicated services are, and how they could be integrated into the ACE ticketing platform. So in the future, you could have one place to go to buy a ticket for any service within sort of the jurisdiction of the 2 agencies here. Go to the next slide. I'll just sort of explain how this works a little bit. So from a phase 1 perspective, so that's the ACE project. In April, the Rail Commission approved a contract with a company named Cuba to provide all of the requirements for phase 1. You can see those requirements kind of in that bubble on the right, which are point-to-point passes, point-to-point tickets. So that's how you purchase a ticket today. Actually, on those services, right? You say, I'm going to leave from Stockton and I'm going to go to Great America, right? That's what we mean by point-to-point, right? You elect like the stations that you are going to travel between. And then it also includes a point of sale system for the ticket sellers. And then we're moving away from mechanical validation to electronic validation. So there is still a validation process. You still got to do an interaction at the station, but that old box is now replaced by a very fancy looking electronic validator that makes fancy sounds like when you do something right, and then makes warning sounds like right when you do something wrong. And right now, the project has been kicked off. It's in development over the first 3 quarters of this fiscal year, so July to February, March. And then the plan is to launch that to passengers at the end of March, beginning of April timeframe for ACE. The next slide. But when we think about the services, you lay them side by side, you can see that there are areas in which there is some level of similarity, but there are also very important areas of dissimilarity. So if you click it one more time. So these would be big ones, right? Like reservations. So on ACE, there are no reservations. You buy a ticket, and that ticket it sort of gives you the ability to travel between those 2 points on any train that we operate, and you don't have to make a reservation for a specific one. But on the San Joaquin's, it's the opposite, right? So if you go onto Amtrak, sanjoaquins.com, and you book a ticket, you are selecting not only the 2 points in which you want to travel, but the exact day and the exact train that you want to travel on, and you have to stick to that reservation. And at times, like during the holidays, like your journey sells out, right? And you cannot buy that ticket anymore, right? This is sort of the nature of reservations. And then the connecting throughway bus service is reserved as well, right? There's only 45 to 55 seats on an over-the-road coach, and we're constrained by that number, right? We can't have like someone standing in the middle of a throughway bus, all the way up the Route 7 corridor to Eureka, right? That would not be safe. That would not be appropriate. So reservations are really important to make sure that we don't exceed our capacity on the throughway bus system. But these areas of dissimilarity actually create a lot of complexity. And systems that require reservations, like the San Joaquin's and the high-speed rail, that's a much more expensive ticketing system than what ACE needs. And so that's really why we broke this up into two components, but we've got to solve for both of them. Let's go to the next slide. So the project approach here, right? We already talked about phase 1 and what is included. And then in phase 2, we have these other items that are needed from an inventory management system, which is sort of the brand, like kind of the type of vendor we're looking to engage with in the future that offers reservations, potentially yield management. So I think we've discussed here, we certainly discussed it at SJVRC that right now the San Joaquin's is piloting a revenue management or yield management system where prices on the tickets change, like you would experience like on an airline. Potential integrations with other platforms like Amtrak or other travel platforms. In the future, maybe you would like to have different classes of service, like on the San Joaquin, something that we've discussed a lot, like having business class, as well as direct seat assignments. Like I want to pick my seat in business class. And certainly some of these features are definitely something that high-speed rail will require. Go to the next slide. And this is sort of like how that works together. The mobile ticketing platform sits at the top. That's what you experience as the passenger, and then in the back end, right, sort of like under the water, like the deck, right? All the feet are turning to make that happen. And one of those is an inventory management system that through APIs will communicate to the interface that you use from Tacuba. And then also you might have other places you might want to buy a ticket. So one example I've used is there may be a desire in the future where I can book a plane ticket from somewhere to the Fresno airport and my high-speed rail ticket and my San Joaquin's ticket, like all in one, right? And having integrations is a way in which we can do that, or you can do that through a global distribution system, which is how the airlines do it today. The next slide. So the next steps for this project on the ACE side, as I mentioned before, we're in development right now through February, March timeframe. The goal is to launch to passengers end of March, beginning of April. It'll include a new mobile app for the passenger, and as well as a different in-station experience. On the San Joaquin's, right now, we're really in the requirement building phase. So we have a lot of processes internally to make sure that we understand exactly what the services need. We're also applying for grant opportunities for this because they're very expensive systems. And so we need to find the funding for it. Towards the end of this year, we'll be like closing the book, like on what we think are the requirements, and then moving towards, well, if these are the requirements, what does that take for the agency to support that function, right? Because we don't currently do some of those things today for the San Joaquin's. And then also to begin to draft like an RFP And then we'll continue to apply for grant opportunities for this phase as well. Go to the next slide. I can take any questions.
Are there any questions?
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. One, with the Vamos app, right, that they have as part of the mobility collective, that's specific to the San Joaquin cog for Stockton. I don't know if other areas, I'm assuming they also got the mobility dollars. But that app utilizes, you're supposed to be able to utilize the ACE train as a component of that. And then I believe the San Joaquin Railway as well, you're supposed to be able to utilize that. They have a card right now that the folks receive. It's a certain area only in Stockton, so it's like a low income designation. And then with that card, you can use any other transportation, the Mio car. The bikes are in transition right now with electric bikes and RTD. So all modes of transportation as part of the mobility, they're going to include now Uber as well. So that's going to be to get them to different destinations. I don't know if that's going to be, I'm assuming it would also be with last mile traveled. So I'm just thinking integration wise, you have the folks that are using that. And so they have the Vamos app, and then we have this other app. So if I'm assuming it would be integrated because they have dollars on their end that are on their that are part of their app and then part of their card. So they have $300 every quarter approximately that's dropped into their card. And so then that's how they rent the electric vehicle and what have you. So I was just thinking, if you, besides one, that question about the integration piece of it, just so that I know when I go back, because I'm part of that collective. The other thing is you talked about grants. So if you're able to do something along those lines, there's grant money that are going to be applied for as of now that that can assist with that process because it's for a specific demographic. However, I mean, obviously everyone would be able to benefit from it, right? Because then it's trying to integrate those components. So so that's one comment, and the other question about how the integration would work with that.
Yes, I think that so we support the Vamos app, and you can buy ACE tickets on the Vamos app today, and you can show them just like you would a ticket in the current ACE application. So that really doesn't change. Like from a form of payment perspective, the way that those are gated is usually by the I'm actually blinking on the term, but essentially the merchant code for your service. And so we've provided SJCOG with our merchant codes. And so a passenger can come and use their, right? It says you could use it for food or you can use it for transportation, right? And you can come in here and then because it's our merchant code is approved, you can buy a ticket on the ACE service. So that wouldn't change. I don't think that we're really looking to integrate Vamos, just like we haven't integrated them today into our system, but we support the use of that ticketing option on the ACE service.
So then if there was some way to do that, or then vice versa, what you have to put into that, I'm just thinking what you were talking about with the grant money. There's grant money that they're going to be applying for that I can speak to, more offline with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's coming up.
Yeah.
Any questions online? I don't see any hands. I have a couple. One came up, this was actually about signage, but it came up as you were talking about ticketing. Within the ACE system and the Amtrak San Joaquin system, they're very different ridership.
Yeah.
And so some of the cultural norms of who rides on which are really understood and not always well communicated. For example, on ACE, there's the quiet cars that I accidentally got on and started talking and had someone, and it was perfectly perfectly appropriate to ask me to be quiet. And there was no way, as me being someone who did not write it regularly, to know.
Sure.
And so there's some internal signage that also needs to be integrated between the two if we are going to cross those populations. That would, for me, who is very committed to rail, not gonna stop me from ever writing ACE again. It may turn other people off who, if that's their first experience and are not committed. So that would be an internal signage that I don't know that we talked about. Second, I one time took the San Joaquin, it was running a tad bit late, so I missed my connection for the Surfliner. And I'm just curious, Surfliner did not require me to have, like, I had a ticket for a certain time, but they said it was no problem that I could get on a different train. And so I'm not sure how that system works, and I know it's not under your purview, but it would be something that if I was sitting where you were, would investigate how they are navigating the, and I know that they probably don't have bus service, so I know that that would be part of the barrier for us here, but how they are navigating the integration between the San Joaquin getting to LAX, or not LAX, LA station, and then getting down to San Diego. So that,
A portion of like the work for phase 2 is like a working group that actually includes the LoSAN agency.
Okay, perfect.
And the LoSAN agency and the Pacific Surfliner actually normally is operating kind of like ACE where they're unreserved. So you're able to use whatever Surfliner you sort of show up to ride. But we would certainly make that a component of any sort of future discussions of ticketing, because actually all of the trains and buses that have Surfliner connections actually are the ones that perform the best, like on the San Joaquin. So we have an interest like in, for our service and for our passengers, making sure that that connection like remains and it's as seamless as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. And finally, there is an absolute barrier when I am telling people about ACE and also San Joaquin to just how uncomfortable they are with it. And so as we're thinking moving forward, this is not directly related, but ticketing is part of it. When I have brought people along with me to navigate the ACE app, and like, you have to activate your ticket prior to doing it. If you're not part of the culture, that really throws people off. And so again, as we're thinking around marketing and some upfront barriers to get buy-in, that would be a place where I am noticing as a person who utilizes the system, that if you are not really committed to it, which most people are not if they're committed to their cars, it's enough of a barrier that it will stop them until they've experienced it. And then, like, I work over in Santa Clara, going over there and hopping off the train and getting to Santa Clara University is so easy from ACE. And once they've experienced it, it's a totally different thing. And I still end up buying the tickets for them.
Well, we appreciate that.
So just know that
Hey, Elizabeth, it looks like your mic is off. I see you talking from remote, but I'm not hearing anything from out here. There you go.
are we good now?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Appreciate it.
But yeah, so that is one way we're gonna overcome that barrier. But if there are similar like travel trainers, like in Stanislaus, like or San Joaquin County, we'd be happy to work with them as well to help them understand like how to walk people through the process, because we definitely recognize that's a barrier and it's a challenge.
Right, and we can get more ridership. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I have a follow-up to your comment and question on that. So if I know that exactly what you said in terms of getting it validated and everything else, and I did the same thing with the quiet train. And the first time that I was on, And I was with a whole group of professionals coming back from Silicon Valley and they like kicked us out. So, but nonetheless, the travel trainers, I'm interested in to know if, you know, who they are or, you know, how we contact them for San Joaquin, because that's really key and important because it sometimes cannot be like us to help them, like hold their hand in the process. And so that first ride for free would help. Do we have anything that's, like a video or anything, like something that, you know, people can tap on online that shows them this is the process and kind of walk them through it? And then
we do have that, and I'll have like Renee, like have Marcus like reach out to you about the travel trainers. It's actually like a program in the Bay Area that's funded, where they're funded to help people. I'm not sure like if there's a similar program in the Valley, but we could certainly work with anybody who would want to take that on.
okay, and then with the online like video that people can look at to kind of go through the steps of, you know, how you purchase your ticket or what have you. Do we have anything that we have currently, like in maybe English and Spanish, that people can tap into via the website or through social media?
Yeah, we have like little videos that like help people know like how to buy a ticket and how to validate a ticket and like the steps to do that. And Renee can send you the links like to those things as well.
I was just thinking of integration.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, David. That was wonderful. All right, we're on item 4, update to throughway bus improvements. That's Michael or Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Michael Hannibal, Senior Planner. Both Dan Levin and I will be offering updates on the throughway bus improvements. We'll kind of focus on different routes and the latest for the Route 3 and 7. So go to the next slide. So for Route 3, service update, this is kind of an update to the Rail Committee from last meeting as well. We are actually just about to roll out the service changes for Route 3 in the northernmost segment. So as you may recall, the Reading Area Bus Authority has worked in agreement with the JPA to operate Route 3 between Reading and Chico. And working with the public operator in RABA allows the JPA to open bus-only ticketing to and from Reading and Red Bluff to the entire rest of the Route 3 corridor. So folks, you know, with the destination or starting their journeys from Reading and Red Bluff are able to now purchase a ticket to Sacramento or to Chico directly and vice versa. So those, you know, great benefits to that would be a Chico State student needing to get home to Reading, let's say, for the holidays. And this change now is going to be implemented next Thursday, the 22nd. Tickets are on sale now, so they anybody looking to make that bus only purchase for those trips can do so. And we really see this as an opportunity to have it as kind of an interim step to get towards I-5 express bus service. Everybody, I'm sure, may be familiar with the Salmon Runner as a concept. It's a state-supported effort to get faster intercity bus service along the I-5 corridor and, you know, make a stop at Sacramento Airport and Sacramento Valley Station itself. And not only that, working towards that, but it also allows us to help prove the viability of bus-only ticketing on this northernmost segment and push towards opening more city pairs along the Route 3 corridor as well, and hopefully doing that in the near future, if not by the end of the year. So go to the next slide. Again, just to demonstrate the bus city pairs that are available for bus-only ticketing, you have every stop along Route 3 with direct connections from Reading and Red Bluff. The only one that's not shown here is Lodi, though you can, you know, I believe the ticketing will allow you to purchase, it still allows you to purchase, like, let's say a Red Bluff to Lodi. You just have to wait for a transfer as they don't exactly match up. Next slide. And then this is what the RAVA operated buses will look like. Again, we kind of have the co-branding with Capital Corridor on our buses, similar to the buses that run on Route 3 currently. And then as you know, our partner with RAVA, they typically have a blue bus, and this is their first time operating these kind of intercity motor coaches. So, you know, this is a nice way to kind of show off the new service there between Reading and Chicago. That's all I have for Route 3. I'm not sure if there's any questions or if we want to go straight to Route 7.
Let me see if
Updates
there's
with
any
Cam.
questions, Michael.
Yep, go ahead.
I have one question, but let me look to see if anyone else. Did I hear you correctly that from the Sacramento train station, there would be a bus to the airport? Did I hear that? Or was that?
That would
did I make that
be, yes, that would be with the implementation of the Salmon Runner service. So we would be working and will be working with RAVA and the Shasta Regional Transportation Authority and Caltrans to help transition some of this service over to the I-5 corridor, and that would allow a stop at the airport from the North State.
Okay, so I don't have to pay $30 per Uber. To get to the airport. Okay, that would be, I'm just gonna put my little plug in for that would be really wonderful. To have
Yeah,
that.
and we certainly gonna work
Because-
through those details.
Yeah, or sometimes I walk, and then get on the bus. Right, but if there was a way to get from the rail station to the airport in a more seamless way, that would encourage ridership. Because it's just 2.5 miles, I think. Maybe a little bit more. It's not very far. All right, thank you. Are there any other questions for Michael? Yes.
So for that last part to get to the airport, it's if you're coming into the station there, but it's not for folks that are, because that's the situation with a lot of professionals that are in
It's
Sacramento.
coming the other direction too. You mean from the airport?
Well,
to-
no, I'm saying if you're in Sacramento, but they didn't ride the railway,
Oh,
are they able to purchase a ticket just for that trip from the station to the airport?
I think that would be the hope, though, again, we are just really kicking off kind of the service planning and working out details with, you know, the agencies up north and Caltrans as well. But yes, bus only ticketing would be the solution we work towards.
yeah.
I just want to just congratulate Michael on this effort because the states wanted to work with Shasta in the northern part of the state on doing this express service along I-5 for a number of years, and they got an application that was awarded back in 2018, a significant application to purchase zero emission buses, but those buses are just not available yet for the distance that's there between Reading and Sacramento. So what Michael's done working with RAVA is really a key first step towards that. And even having these buses offer an interim solution until we can get the zero emission buses that can actually do the full run. So these buses are going to be used initially between Chico and Reading, but hopefully in a year or so, or a year or two, that these same buses would be sort of a renewable diesel option until we have zero emission buses that can actually make that run. And this effort that Michael's doing is really absolutely critical to getting that running. But once we have that running, you would be able to make that bus only trip between Sacramento and the airport using the service because it's being operated by a public operator.
And they do have an express near the Amtrak train station to the airport, but you have to walk to it.
Yeah.
And there's no integration between what is the local system and the train. So whatever works, if there was a bus that came that was from the local system in Sacramento, that would be an express bus, that would be in an interim, that you don't have to walk across several streets to get to, that would also. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one quick one. At one point, the throughway buses from San Francisco, taking you to Emeryville, stopped at 3 or 4 different locations. Now it's strictly the sales building. Is that a permanent thing, or are there any plans to maybe at least go to the Caltrain station? And that enables people to use rail connections all the way to Caltrain and anywhere down on the peninsula. Now there's that void between the Caltrain station and the Salesforce. Is there any chance that might be reinstated?
So that might be a different funding source, but what about?
At this point, I don't think we're looking at that yet, but that's something that, I mean, we certainly can take that into consideration in the future. Always looking to make improvements. A key thing was they were really, as you pointed out, right, we used to have several stops, but there was a real concerted effort to try to get all services to come together at the Salesforce Transit Center.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other question I have regarding the Salesforce building, I have a friend that uses that all the time to come to Fresno. And she's very concerned about what's gonna happen in the winter when it's pouring down rain. There's no shelter there. Any plans to maybe build like the buses have in different areas, a little aluminum cover where you could at least get out of the rain? I guess right now all you can do is go inside the Salesforce building.
Yeah. Notice that we are outside, well, as you mentioned, and that's because they want to charge very high rates to be inside. And unfortunately, that's not sort of in our budget. So that's where the issue comes in for that. But yeah, that's another thing for us to look into.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Question?
Yeah, what's the status of the throughway bus between Merced and San Jose?
That one is tied in with getting the 7th daily round trip running. And so we are expecting to be running the 7th daily round trip coming up soon. I believe it's January is what we're looking at. So once we have that I mean, unfortunately, we had hoped to have that one running quite a while ago, but I mean, the pandemic hit. But once we have the 7th back, that's tied into the schedule for the Route 40, but Route 40 is part of that. And so we'd expect it to be operating as well next year.
Okay, also, there is no, I'm in the Central Valley, Madera, with my family in Monterey. There is no really good public transportation options from the Central Valley now to Monterey Peninsula. And I'm wondering, if there's some opportunity for us. Greyhound doesn't do it anymore. You can use our service in San Jose, but then you gotta get to the airport and use the commuter between the airport and Monterey and Salinas, and it's another inconvenient. So I don't know if that's ever worthwhile taking a good look at that when the time comes with the 7th trip, or.
Yeah, that's again, so we can put on the list. We do have the service that makes the connection at San Jose to Santa Cruz. And there are efforts to create even rail service down to sort of the Monterey area, but that's something we'll have to look into for the future.
Any other questions online?
Okay, this is Hank Fung, Los Angeles County. Just wanted to, I understand you had mentioned the bus is going from Reagan to Chico, so there's still a transfer in Chico then? And how does that timing work and all that?
Yes, so this does require a transfer at Chico if you're continuing on now. And I believe the time between buses is only about 5 to 10 minutes, just to account for any traffic that any of the north or southbound buses may experience. And so we really worked with Amtrak and RABA to make sure that transfer time is as minimal as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay, seeing none.
I'm gonna jump in. This is Yeah, sorry about that. I wasn't moving fast enough. This is Patricia Lynn. I am in San Francisco and I do ride to Fresno quite frequently to see my mother. And I would just like to reiterate the confusion at Salesforce Tower and having stood out in the rain quite a bit. I like that we'll look at it and I'd like us to consider it as a way to make us more user friendly for the people from the Bay Area who are going to the Valley. So I just want to reiterate the previous comment. That's it.
Thank you, Patricia.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Don't want to cut anyone off or comments. All right, back to you, Michael or Dan.
So I'm gonna discuss Route 7, what we're doing on the Route 7. Route 7, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's the route that goes from Martinez all the way to Cal Poly Humboldt. In Arcata, it's about 300 miles long, including the Martinez station. We have 18 stops. Go to the next slide. We do have a number of issues with the current schedule. This includes probably the foremost issue is that the hours for the bus operations are too long as they currently are. We've been noticed by both the operator and by Amtrak that we're at sort of the legal limits for labor laws for the current service, the current schedule, and that we need to make some changes. In addition, this route, which previously, before the pandemic, was meeting the state's goals for cost effectiveness, is no longer doing so, mainly because increased operating costs which have occurred over the last several years. And so that has been an issue. Part of that is due to, with the current schedule, needing to have sort of this short round trip between Napa and Martinez that's relatively low ridership. In addition, the current schedule, we went to great efforts to get bus-only tickets available throughout all the station pairs on this route, but there are some issues with the current schedule where it doesn't really serve those markets as best as it could. And then finally, this issue that came up starting early this year was that there's a new service that runs basically between Eureka and Ukiah that's duplicating sort of our service. It's also funded by the state largely, and it's being run by Humboldt Transit Authority. But right now, these services really aren't integrated between our service and their service. So if you go to the next slide. This is just our current schedule. I know it's a little bit hard to see with this figure, but I just want a key point on this is that if you look on the right side with the northbound, we have a situation where we are stopping at all the stops, and on the southbound, however, neither of our two buses, which make it all the way to Cal Poly, are stopping at all the stops down in the Bay Area. And so if you're a passenger in Eureka or Arcata or Cal Poly Humboldt and you want to go to either Napa or Vallejo, you really can't, because you can only do it one direction. That's a problem. And then for our key stations of Santa Rosa, which is our #1 destination other than Martinez, we only have one option that you can take between the two buses that go all the way up to the far north. In the same way, we're at Petaluma, where we connect with the Smart rail service. Well, again, only one option. If you go to the next slide. I mentioned this new service. It started February. It's called the Redwood Coast Express. As you can see in this figure, it basically stops the same locations that we do. It does stop at a couple additional ones within a couple of the cities that we stop at, but it basically is sort of duplicating our service to a large extent. And right now it's running at a very similar time as our service runs. But unfortunately, right now, the way it's set up, if you go to the next slide, the northbound service, which initiates from Ukiah at 2:15, our service gets into Ukiah at 2:10. So there's only 5 minutes. And that's really not enough time for a transfer, because unfortunately, our buses are not always perfectly on time. So that we really need more time. And Ukiah is a rest stop. So we typically have like a 40-minute sort of window at Ukiah where people are getting off the bus, getting food, resting, doing other things. Our bus drivers are resting. And so we really needed more of a break in between to make sort of something work with this schedule. We did communicate with Humboldt Transit Authority on a number of different options on what to do. even though our schedule is really not integrated with them, they spend a lot of time integrating with local and regional services. And so from both the north and the south and other locations, their service is very well integrated with other services, but just not ours. And because of that, they really did not want to change their time they currently have. This is a new service. It would be very confusing for them to make some initial changes at this point. So if you go to the next slide. And looking at our service and theirs, which right now are kind of duplicative between Ukiah and Eureka, looking at the number of passengers that we get, a key thing to note here is that this slide is kind of showing you at each stop how many passengers we get over the course of the year, and then also how many we kind of have average daily passengers. But between Ukiah and Cal Poly Humboldt, the key thing is there's a couple of stops with very, very low average daily ridership, and that's at Leggett and Laytonville. The population at Leggett is about 46 people at the community. Laytonville has about 550. So these are very, very low population areas. But again, they are served by the new services on the Humboldt Transit Authority service as well. I just on something that is of interest on this. If you look at sort of Route 7, mentioned before, Santa Rosa is our #1 stop along the way. I mean, Martinez is the #1 stop. That's because those people get on the train. But outside of Martinez, Santa Rosa, we're getting about 30 passengers a day at our Santa Rosa stop. But if you look at this route, at the end of the route, Eureka, Arcata, and Cal Poly Humboldt, if you add those three up, they're actually over 30 passengers. So we're getting really good ridership at the end of the route as well. It's just that some of these stops in between, we have some very, very low ridership stops. If you go to the next slide. So this schedule is something that we've come up with working with our partner agencies, communicating with not just the Humboldt Transit Authority folks. They lead a group along the northern state called the North State Super Region Group. We've been working with them. We've been working obviously with Amtrak and our operator as well. But we've come up with a schedule that we think solves a number of the problems that we face. First and foremost, it meets, working both with the operator and Amtrak, it meets the legal limits. It does allow us to eliminate that one round trip to Napa, the short round trip, which will make this a much more cost-effective route. It's also going to be more cost-effective because we think that it will better serve the major markets that we serve. And it increases the opportunities for bus-only ticketing, where if you look on this, we are able for our passengers going from Eureka, Arcata, and Cal Poly Humboldt, we'll be able to go to places like Napa or Vallejo and make those important connections with bus-only ticketing. So it has a number of positives, but in addition, it's integrated with the Humboldt Transit Authority route, so that if the northbound train now gets in time around 1:30, so there's plenty of time for that connection with their northbound service as well. And it fits in with our regular rest stop. Now, the thing about this is, to do this, we are proposing to eliminate the Leggett stop and the Laytonville stop, as well as our seasonal Discovery Kingdom stop in Vallejo. And then again, those two stops at Leggett and Laytonville would be able to have access to the Humboldt Transit Authority stop. The only thing, but right now that service is only working on weekdays. That's sort of the major drawback, is that they offer a weekday service. In the future, we will be working with them to try to get them to do 7-day-a-week service. We'll work with our partners at the state as well to try to get that done. But right now, that's sort of the major drawback, is right now they're 5-day-a-week service. But again, we think this offers solves sort of the various problems that we have, and will be, again, a more cost-effective and a higher ridership route by making these changes. And we're looking to bring this to our board at our next board meeting, which is September 20th. And it'll be action on there. And if we're successful, we would have this implemented by, plan is October 1. Questions?
Any questions? Do we have any representatives from way up north, California today? I don't know where everyone is from.
I saw that John was not on early, John Webb, but we have reached out to another group that he is part of, RailPack, and are looking to set up a meeting that he would be a part of with other RailPack members as well to talk about this.
They're the ones that are most impacted by this, and I don't have as much experience on that part of the.
Well, I should note that for our passengers where we have the biggest markets, they're gonna get a reduced trip time as well, which we think will increase ridership for those, the desirability for them, as well as having more options for the bus line ticketing.
And also the times that you're getting in are reasonable. You're not getting in at midnight.
Yes.
So, reasonable times, to get in and get someone pick you up at the station. Any questions? Okay, I see none.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you, Michael and Dan. Moving on to item 4. Oh, no, 5, sorry. Moving on to item 5. I even have it marked. Rookie mistake. Update on Amtrak, San Joaquin's operations, ridership, and revenue.
So much, Dan.
All right.
So typically what we have done in the past is just to provide an update like on how the service is doing. And so I'll be taking sort of the ridership and revenue portion and then over to Nathan and he'll do the OTP operations portion. So you go to the next slide. This table represents the full FY 23-24 performance of the San Joaquins. You can see that from a ridership perspective, we got over that 900,000 rider mark this fiscal year, which really represented somewhere around like a 9% increase year over year, which is nice to see. We're still pushing forward toward like getting past the 1 million mark. Again, as our forecast for 24-25 doesn't quite reach the 1 million mark, but is somewhere around the 970,000 riders this year. From a revenue perspective, again, we grew on the revenue side about 7%, a little bit under the increase on the ridership side. I think one of the features there, and I think we've discussed this at the board meetings, is the early on in the recovery period for the San Joaquins, the first folks to come back to ride were actually the longer distance riders. So as we've been continuing to grow ridership, it's been more on the smaller trip side and actually on like the train only side. And those are typically lower revenue riders like for the service. So we would expect that ridership and revenue increases would have a slight difference. Go to the next slide. Also, one of the things that would be helpful would actually be to show the San Joaquin's throughway system performance overall. This is a sort of a graph that shows over the past several years, like how that whole system itself is performing. Just a reminder, and we just got a great update from Dan and Michael. You know, about over 60% of San Joaquin's passengers are taking a bus at one end of their trip. And many of those are actually taking 2 buses. So this is a really important part of what we do. Something that we should note is that we're actually right now running a significantly smaller throughway bus system than we were pre-pandemic. And so we're trying to get back to pre-pandemic ridership levels, but with a smaller network to leverage. If you go to the next slide, kind of like summing these numbers up, this is really what it looks like. So in FY 18-19, we were nearly 665,000 riders in the throughway bus system, and we ended FY 23-24 with about 625,000. So we're a little bit off from where we were pre-pandemic, but still growing on a year-over-year basis. And really trying to get back to previous performance. Go to the next slide. Just a couple of updates around the service. So one of the things we've been talking about with you is, well, what does the food service look like on the ventures? We're still pursuing the vending machines and other services. But one of the things that we are doing is pivoting away from the box that we've shown you in the past, which one of the things we found is the box, you know, it includes like 4 items, but people were like eating 1 and then throwing away 3, or opening all of the boxes because they thought, well, maybe the other boxes have different things in them, and just actually leading to a lot of waste. And then the box itself, as well as the packing, is an extra cost. Actually moving to a larger complimentary service on board the venture cars in this interim period where we're waiting for a more established food and beverage system where it'll be like a grab and go environment in 2 cars, still complimentary. There'll be water still available, and then several different items that passengers can take one or two and free of charge. So that's something that we're moving towards. You'll start seeing that on the venture cars towards the end of this month. And then just want to plug Allensworth. So the Allensworth rededication ceremony is on October 12th. Allensworth is a state historic park. It is our only stop in Visalia County, or not in Tulare County. And so we would love for the rail committee members and for your help actually to expand the outreach for Allensworth and for the trains that are running to Allensworth that day. The rededication event, super fun, and it's a really great time to learn about California's history as well as celebrate the park with those that will be there. As Dan mentioned earlier, we're looking to reintroduce the 7th round trip, but that's been pushed to the winter of 24-25 from where we had hoped it would be in the fall timeframe. And that has to do with just some logistical things like deciding on the final schedule and really kind of getting all the resources aligned as well as the equipment. So we're looking at the January, February timeframe for that. And then once we establish that schedule, then we'll be able to really determine like what is the Route 40 schedule going to be. And then just wanted to plug that in addition to some of the great connecting service information that Dan and Michael gave, we also started a new service with CART that is providing service between the Visalia and Hanford. And it's actually a free service. You just show your San Joaquin's ticket and you can ride from the Hanford station to Visalia or vice versa. This is a way in which Route 18 is being modified to really like leverage our local partners and working with them to provide some of that connectivity for our passengers. And I don't know, hand it over to me.
Thank you. So last time we met, we talked about the numbers for the first half of the year in regards to how the service did for on-time performance. And so for the first half of this fiscal year, we had several months where the service was able to hit 79%, I think, for 2 or 3 out of the months, and then ended with an average of 73% for the first half. But as we take a look at the numbers for the second half of this fiscal year, you can see in January, we started off with a bang, hit 85%. And that's mainly due that freight traffic was pretty significantly down in the month of January coming out of the holidays, and that takes a little while to ramp back up. But as we came into February and March, that traffic started to come back, and both BNSF and UP had several projects going as well that led to some slow orders and reduced performance for the service. And then as we got into the early summer months, May and June, the heat and issues with summer problems caused some mechanical issues. And so as that freight traffic came back and then those issues as well, we had a little bit of a bump due to less freight traffic, but those mechanical issues really plagued us throughout June. So those have since been addressed, and we've seen a better month in the month of July, this past month. But overall, for the second half of the year, we finished at 72% for this fiscal year. If we can go to the next slide, we can take a look at how the fiscal year stacked up versus the prior year. If you look at the orange line here, that represents this fiscal year that just wrapped up. And as you can see, those bars there are the previous fiscal year. And we kind of stayed in the same range for most of the year until we get to March, April, May, and June. And you can see a pretty dramatic difference there in those months. And that was mainly due to the previous winter when we had the unprecedented rain and precipitation throughout those months that caused the flooding in the southern region down in Wasco and Corcoran area that led to BNSF raising the tracks and the maintenance that went along with it, the tie replacement and the slow orders in the months throughout that issue. So you can see a pretty big difference there. This fiscal year, we performed much better in that area. And so that led to increased performance. I think we outpaced last year by about 6% average. So that's good to see. And in the month of June this year, or month of July this year, we started off well as well. If we go to the next slide. Give a quick update on the venture cars. As we discussed previously, set 1 entered service back in December and set 2 entered service into March. Both of those sets of equipment were able to attain a 30-day failure-free period, which helped satisfy part of the contract between the state and the manufacturer of the equipment. Set 2 is scheduled to come out of service for its routine preventative maintenance here in early September. And at that time, we'll be looking to introduce Venture Set 3 into service. So we'll maintain 2 sets of Venture cars in service even when Set 2 comes out. And Set 3 will go in on the 7/10, 7/19 schedule, which will put it in Oakland every night. So it can be inspected also to get that 30-day failure-free period. That's it for the operation. Is any questions?
Any questions? Yes.
Yeah, the status of the, food and beverage service on the venture cars. Still proceeding with, vending machines, and are they scheduled to be manufactured, or what's going on there?
Yeah, so we entered into an agreement with a company named Crane, and we've been working through the process of getting their sort of off-the-shelf machines approved for the railroad environment. I think last time we provided an update, our goal was to have those on board in the winter of this year, like the first pilot car. So in the January, February timeframe, but the pilot car for the vending would be kind of running around, and we'd be testing like how it sort of all works in the moving environment.
Any chance of getting a few tables included in those cars?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think something that we've identified as well. One of the challenges with the way in which the venture cars were specified is there isn't that like alternative experience option on board the venture sets, where the food service car looks sort of just like a regular coach car, except for some seats are taken out at each end. We're discussing like how we might augment that experience on board. I mean, certainly there's a lot that goes into that from like a safety perspective, and like where the windows are, and like how you're not allowed to do certain things. So we're evaluating that, but it's going to be like longer before we can make those changes, just because that's the way the cars were spec'd.
I just recall the Southern Pacific in their last days of their last passengers being pushed off using vending machines.
Yeah, our hope is that we'll do better than that service with the products that we're able to offer and the experience like within the car with actual machines themselves. We're also like looking at other options to augment the vending service. And that it just takes some time to put those things together and understand like what is and is not possible within like the rail environment. We're still working on it.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
What type of food are you planning on having available in these vending machines? They're gonna be like salads and sandwiches, or is it just gonna be candy bars and coffee? And what are we looking at?
This is a great question. Yeah. So the way that the car is set up is there's 3 machines per vending car, and then there's 2 vending cars per train. So each car is going to be built identically. So there'll be a coffee machine that will not only make you like a cup of coffee, but will also make you other fancy coffee drinks, I guess, if you would like, which I think that I'm not sure if we can make coffee that's like worse than the coffee that we serve today, because it's not very good. And so I think that will definitely be an upgrade, and you'll be able to buy other types of things. Then there's a beverage machine that will house all sorts of different drinks, from soda, water, juice, things of that nature. And then there's what we call a combo machine, which is a refrigerated machine that will sell snacks, and yeah, we'll probably sell some candy, things like that. But then we would be looking at like maybe not in the initial pilot car, but in the near future, like having some sort of small meals like sandwiches or salads that would be included in that machine. I think the challenge for us will be the spoilage time of those products, and so we need the platform to be more established to then like include those in the machine, and like with the ability to not have them spoil like all the time. But yeah, that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, so that complimentary box that you have now, that's being replaced?
Yes. So what you'll experience is the way it was intended to work is that you would go into the car where the complimentary service was offered, this box, and you would go to the luggage rack, and they would be on the luggage rack. Well, that never worked out. They just put them on a table, and they don't look very nice. And then we have this spoilage issue where people are just throwing stuff away. And so actually what we've done is we modified that rack with bins that then will be preloaded with a variety of different complimentary items, including water. And then as a passenger, you would enter the car, you would see this little snack station is what we call it. And then you would be able to grab and go like what products you would like to have like on your trip.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. And then there was a question on the Allensworth, that event, if there's like a PDF or flyer. And then for the cart service, is that current? And then do we have something that we can share with that as well?
Yeah, so we do have flyers for Allensworth. We can send that around. And then for the cart service, is there like a little flyer, Renee, for the cart service?
I will find out.
Okay, yeah, we'll figure it out. And then yes, we will send that around as well. Like how do you use it? Like, cause you do have to walk. I don't know if you, for those who are familiar with the Hanford station, there's like 2 platforms. And then the cart transit center is like on the other side of a fence. And so you do need to walk like out and then around to the transit center to access the service. So we'll get you a flyer for sure.
Thank you.
I just have a question about accessibility of payment for the vending machines. Will there be multiple ways that you can pay for them?
Yes, so you'll be able to use cash, card, Apple Pay, all of the payment.
Okay,
options.
perfect. Yeah, I just noticed that some of the vending machines are now not accepting cash anymore. And so I just wanted, as an accessibility
And we're
option.
really sensitive to that. I think
Yeah.
that one of the things that we actually have to continually remind Amtrak of is San Joaquin still takes in a lot of cash. And like, we're very different than the other corridors. And so we kind of fight to keep access for cash in all areas of our service. And the vending is no different.
So that's why I asked the question to support you.
Thank you so much. All the support that we can get.
It came up in our meeting, you can say that. And so, yeah,
For sure.
all right. Are there any questions online? Okay, seeing none.
I
Oh,
do have one more operation question. I think at last count, we've had over 4,500 degree days this summer. Has that caused any major slow orders like they experienced on the East Coast that made all the news?
There have not been very many heat related slow orders. The issues with the heat came more on the mechanical side. Actually, with operating terms. But those have been worked through, and like I said, in July, we had a really hot days that we had.
Right. Thank you.
Yes,
I, been kind of waiting to figure out which agenda item would be best for me to bring up concern. So I'll go ahead and bring it up now. We have what, 5 unmanned stations on the San Joaquin Road? It's up to 4, 5 or 6. Anyway, that's.
Oh, yeah, but that's more than 5.
That's-
Yeah.
So my question is, I'm in Madera and I haven't used the San Joaquin in over a year. I used to use it much more frequently. So I went out this morning and restroom facilities are boarded up with a sign on it that says, due to excessive vandalism, this is no longer available. Has that been the case in the other unmanned stations as well?
Well, yeah, I think that's actually more, it's a bit unique to Madera, in that our other unmanned stations don't have restroom facilities. Like in Madera, we were at, like, we don't own the station, the city owns the station, but they were having routine issues of people breaking in and actually living in the restrooms, which led them to say, well, we're just gonna close those.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we don't necessarily have that concern at other stations because those facilities just aren't offered.
So my concern would be, should be directed at the city of Madera.
Yes, and then I'm sure also that that station getting relocated as well.
Right, and that's another question. Until high-speed rail, we make the cross-platform facility there, is that going to be, that will be unmanned as well in the beginning, right?
Yes, it is the plan to be an unmanned station at this point.
Thank you.
right. Any other questions? Okay, moving on to item 6, update on upcoming grant applications.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Andy Cook. I'm the Manager of Planning and Programming with the JVA, and I will be providing an update on upcoming grant applications. So the Planning, Grant, and Programming Department at the agency is working really aggressively to secure additional sources of state and federal funding to support implementation of the agency's Valley Rail program. Staff presented a report to a joint meeting of the JPA and Regional Rail Commission boards last March that outlined funding challenges and needs for delivering the Valley Rail Capital Program. And at that time, the boards provided direction to staff to apply for additional state and federal funding as part of our strategy for funding the Valley Rail program needs. And I'll be providing an update or status report on our efforts to apply for grant funding. Next slide, please. I'll start out with kind of outlining a few funding awards that have happened based on the applications we've submitted. We received an award through Caltrans for planning funding to provide resources for the San Joaquin Valley Regional Policy Council's Rail and Transit Working Group, which is a new group that the JPA staff is leading. That involves coordination between the different regional transportation agencies on the San Joaquin Valley to coordinate transit and rail planning and address network integration and coordinated scheduling to provide good connections between transit and rail. The grant we received will provide resources to support that activity, which will kick off hopefully early next year. And it did include funding for some high-level TOD action planning. So this will be an important effort that the JPA staff will be undertaking, incorporating in coordination with the regional agency staff on valley-wide rail and transit planning. Next, we applied for, but we
that train is going by.
Okay,
I'm
I'll
just
hold
gonna
on.
have you hold just for a second. It's a good freight train. It's a good long one.
I will say the noise canceling on Teams is very good because here online, we don't hear a peep.
Oh, that's good. We could not hear you talk because of it. I think there might be no more whistles. Yeah, I think
Okay.
we're good. You can go. You can
Okay.
continue on.
Okay, great.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. I understand what it's like there when the train goes by. Let's see, we applied for but did not receive an award to the RAISE program, federal program for the North Lathrop Transfer Station. We haven't been successful at securing funding through the RAISE program in the past, but US DOT staff did reach out to us to let us know that this project was really highly rated and that they expressed their intention to have this project resubmitted. So we're hopeful that this will be competitive and we intend to resubmit it, but regardless, we are looking at funding options for fully funding the North Lathrop Transfer Station project, which is really important for Valley Rail. Next slide, please. So I'll talk about pending award announcements based on the applications we've been submitting this year, and I'll start out with the Stockton Diamond Grade Separation Project. There is a shortfall in funding to complete the Stockton Diamond Grade Separation, which is scheduled to go out for bid for construction early next year. We have developed a funding strategy identifying grant programs we can go after to fill that funding shortfall. We were successful in partnering with the Port of Stockton to submit an application to the Federal Maritime Administration for the Port Infrastructure Development Program, and are expecting to receive an award for that federal program later this fall. We did do some consultation with the State Transportation Agency on its current competitive cycle for the Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program, and we're encouraged to submit an application that included funding for the Stockton Diamond Grade Separation Project, which was just submitted. So they're scheduled to announce awards in October, and we feel like based on our consultation efforts with CALSTA, we feel like we're very competitive in securing additional state funding through TIRSEP, specifically for the Stockton Diamond project, where we can claim greenhouse gas benefits for passenger service that weren't claimed in the prior Valley Rail TIRSIP applications. So that's a good opportunity. We've submitted these applications for Stockton Diamond. As you just heard, the train going by, that's a hugely congested rail junction, and this project will great separate that. So this is important for unlocking capacity for passenger and freight service in Northern California. I'm looking forward to that kicking off construction early next year. There's a lot of funding through the FRA and US DOT that were tied to the bipartisan infrastructure law, including funding for passenger rail through the CRISI, Consolidated Rail Investment and Safety Improvement Programs, and then the MEGA program through US DOT. We identified a fairly ambitious application to submit a grant application, including funding for a program of projects to support Valley Rail North, which is the service including Valley Rail for more service to Sacramento. So I've outlined the various projects included in the Valley Rail Capital Program for Valley Rail North, and that was included in this application, which totaled $120 million. We submitted that for both the CRISI program and the MEGA program, and again, that'll be announced this fall. I didn't list it, but we did include some amount of funding for the Track C Workforce Development Program, which was an eligible cost of the CRISI program. And then we did partner with Caltrans to submit an application for the Madeira High-Speed Rail project, which was a way for us to get another application in from California for the MEGA project. So I didn't list that here, but we're hoping to receive announcements for these awards this fall. And then next, we've identified a strategy for securing funding for zero-emission equipment procurement needs through the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, which is a state program for affordable housing development. But we have been successful in the past for getting money by partnering with affordable housing developers to include zero-emission equipment for service that benefits the TOD included in these applications. We just received an announcement that we did receive about $12 million to this program, which was awarded to the 16th and T Street TOD project in Sacramento, which is a partnership with the Capital Area Development Authority, I believe. So we just got an announcement that we got $12 million for zero-emission train equipment needs for Valley Rail. And then next, we've also identified the Active Transportation Program as a strategy for funding bike and pedestrian improvements, included components of station projects in Valley Rail. This program is divided up between the state and regional share. We submitted a statewide application for station improvements at Ceres and Modesto in Stanislaus County, North Lathrop and Lodi, San Joaquin County, and then the Elk Grove Station, Sacramento County. That was submitted, and then we are still working on the regional application, which I'll talk about later. It's a pending application. Next slide, please. So I'll review upcoming funding opportunities that we're applying for. We're in the process of developing an application for the Railroad Crossing Elimination Program with the Federal Railroad Administration. The application is due in September. This is a supplemental source of funding we're applying for the Stockton Diamond project. It's basically an insurance strategy in case we don't receive funding through the port grant that we submitted for earlier this year. We'll be submitting this in September. We do feel like this will be competitive, and it seems to rate well against the grant criteria. Let's see. The Restoration Enhancement Grant Program is something that was announced, but we will not be applying for this. In coordination with the State Transportation Agency, we determined that the state will be applying for improvements on behalf of LoSAN, and so we will not be applying for this in this cycle. And then the Federal State Partnership for Intercity Passenger Rail Grant Program is the most significant source of intercity passenger rail funding available through the FRA. We anticipate that call for projects will be announced this October or November. And so we are preparing to develop an application concept for this. We've long targeted improvements for the San Joaquin corridor, capital requirements on the BNSF to provide additional service between Stockton and Merced. We're currently engaged with the BNSF on some refined service planning and modeling work to confirm the priority infrastructure improvements needed for that. So our timing of this engagement with the BNSF Railway may require us to look at different options for how to submit an an application for this funding program. So that's something we'll need to come back to the committee and the board with as we kind of work through the steps with BNSF and our planning work. So we've there's a federal program called the Good Jobs Challenge available to the U.S. Department of Commerce and Economic Development Administration. We're submitting an application for Track C funding for that program. And then we've done a lot of work to partner with Caltrans to include projects in its forthcoming applications for the CDC's competitive SD1 funding programs, including the Solutions for Congested Corridors program and the Trade Corridor Enhancement program, which is freight oriented. Caltrans has selected the North Lathrop Transfer Station for its Congested Corridors program application, and then the UP's Tuolumne River Bridge project for the TSAT program will be moving forward to coordinate with Caltrans to develop those and submit those to the CTC for review. And these are important projects, so I appreciate Caltrans and state support on that. Next slide, please. And then finally, to wrap things up, we'll also be submitting an application for the Local Partnership Program, which is another state program, which will involve a partnership between our agency and a regional agency on a project, but we're still in the process of pinpointing, identifying the project. We'll submit for that. There are different considerations of doing this and based on our needs. So this is something else that's to be determined, but we do intend to submit an application for this. And then regional applications for active transportation program. I addressed this earlier, but there were significant cuts to the regional share of the ATP program statewide, which were just announced recently. It was sort of a surprise, but based on that, we really had to scale back the scope of our application for ATP funding for station improvements. And right now we tend to work with SJCOG to submit an application for the North Lathrop Transfer Station improvements specifically, because it looks like SJCOG in San Joaquin County is able to backfill funding that was lost through the local measure funds. So this is something else we continue to discuss, and we intend to coordinate further with SJCOG. And next slide, please. And then finally, I think we've reported on this before, but we have been doing a lot of regional coordination to secure funding through the SB 125 program, which was supplemental funding improved in the state budget through the Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program for transit. So we were successful in securing funds through different regional agencies for operations and capital costs, which are outlined here. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to take questions or comments from the committee.
Okay, any questions for Andrew? Questions?
Yeah, I have a question. On the Good Jobs Challenge application for the Track C, I don't know if I missed that, how much it was for, and is it to increase capacity in terms of having additional students go through that?
Let's see. I didn't write down how much that's for, but I mean that's funding to sustain our ability to have that program. I'll need to come back. I can respond to that question offline with more details about the capacity that will provide. But that is funding that we've identified to help us continue to provide that workforce program.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Questions online? I just have a question about the ATP funding. I think that was in the series Modesto is where I'm specifically talking about. It's my understanding, or what I heard was that it's for station improvement is the last half mile, first half mile part of that improvement plan with the ATP funding, since it's so connected to bicycling and walking?
Not first and last mile. We've inventoried the bike and ped access improvements as part of the station project itself, and so we're applying for those components of the project. So that includes pedestrian track crossings, platform access. So it's specific to the station project itself.
Okay, perfect. That was just clarification of what it was paid for. Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, let's move on to item 7, update on Valley Rail program and integration with high-speed rail.
That would be me again. Keep go to the next slide, please. So our Valley Rail program, that is our joint expansion program between both the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority and the San Joaquin Regional Rail Authority for Commission for our 2 services, both ACE and San Joaquin's, to expand ACE down to Merced and extend ACE to Sacramento, as well as add additional service for the San Joaquin's. To date, we've received over 1.6 billion with all the grants that Andy's got going. I would hope within the next 6 months, we'd be closer to be able to say 2 billion by that time, potentially. So that number is growing rapidly. We still do expect our first round trip for ACE expansion between San Jose and Modesto and the Thomas in San Jose by the end of 2026. We have run into issues with construction along the UP corridor, and that does create some issues with developing the Modesto and Ceres stations. This is largely because of underground utilities and the fact that we are going to need to relocate some of these. And some of these are very difficult to relocate because they're like pressurized gas lines. So this is causing us to look at some options to make sure that we're able to make these dates as quickly as we can. We're looking at options at both Modesto and Ceres to be able to try to see what we can do, even if the station is not fully complete, to be able to initially operate service. We do have some experience doing that here at Cabral. Some of you might remember that the San Joaquin's for some time were boarding on Weber, and that was until we were able to get the grade separation at Minor. That was what was needed, and so we did that successfully for some time, and now of course we don't need to, but that's something that we have done with UP. It did work. It's not ideal, but it's better than not running service. So we are, especially at Modesto, there's a real opportunity on K Street for us to do that, to enable us to start service even before the full station is complete. Ceres is a little more complicated. So in addition to looking at options right around the station, we are also looking at the possibility of starting service at the layover at Keys if we can't do it at Ceres in 2026. Go to the next slide, please. Pleased to be able to report that we have started construction on the service improvements that are needed between Lathrop and Ceres. This photo was taken at the grand opening ceremony for construction starting in June. If you go to the next slide, our chairs were there. And then the next slide is just showing where the actual construction site is located for this initial construction. This is at the Lathrop Y. I'm doing a culvert groundbreaking. This is the longest lead time on the construction package is needed for the Lathrop Y and track extension. Construction on the actual tracks are not expected to start until next year. Go to the next slide. This just shows you our key connection between sort of the Lathrop area and Merced. The green and the purple, that's along the UP corridor where the A service will run. But then east of that, you can see sort of the blue line. That's where the San Joaquin's run along the BNSF. We do need additional funding for both of these. On the east side, we're still seeking funds south of Ceres. We do have partial funding between Ceres and Turlock. We have about $100 million. We currently have grant applications in for the remaining funds for that segment. But at this point, we do not have the funding from Turlock all the way to Merced. So we are seeking grants for those in the future. And then for the San Joaquin's, we do have the funding secured for the 8th round trip for the San Joaquin's from Merced North. But we do not have the funds secured yet for the 9th, the 10th, the 11th, and the 12th. And so Andy is leading efforts, service planning efforts, working with BNSF to be able to identify what improvements are needed and to be able to do those improvements incrementally to be able to add those additional services in the future as well. Go to the next slide. This slide just shows how our Valley Rail program integrates with high-speed rail. Services being developed between Merced and Bakersfield. We've talked about this before, but the San Joaquin's, once high-speed rail starts operating in Merced, we would truncate our service at Merced. The opposite with ACE will extend ACE down, and we'll have the three services come together at a multimodal hub station in downtown Merced. On this figure, you can also see how it's not just our rail services, but the San Joaquin's throughway buses also play a very, very important part in terms of integrating with future high-speed rail, so that high-speed rail segment, the multi-billion-dollar, $30 billion plus segment that's being built between Merced and Bakersfield, will be fully integrated as part of a statewide network. You'll be able, with a single ticket, go all the way from Eureka all the way down to San Diego. We are, with the JPA, expected to be the operating agency for the early high-speed rail operations. And we are in the process of working with the High-Speed Rail Authority on the various agreements that are going to be needed for us to be able to do that. It'll be very similar, in some ways, it's similar to how we work with the freight railroads, in that the expectation is that the JPA between Merced and Bakersfield, instead of leasing slots from BNSF like we currently do, we would basically lease slots from the High-Speed Rail Authority, and we'd also lease their equipment to be able to run past high-speed rail service between Merced and Bakersfield. Go to the next slide. This slide shows you that the amount of service we're working towards in sort of what we call the sort of midterm time frame, and that this is what we're hoping to have operating by the time high-speed rail starts operations. The darker colors, the darker purple and the darker blue, represent the existing round trips that are available. Don't worry about it. I'm good. I can see. He knows that my there's no connection for my battery, so I've run out of juice. So I'm having to look at that screen. But the lighter colors represent the new round trips that we're looking to have implemented as part of this for additional service. And so this is something where we are working with the High-Speed Rail Authority now on further defining the schedule for when these improvements can be done. We expect to have that work done by the end of the year. It's certainly not all these are going to be done at once, and so we have to have a plan that allows us to do this phased over time. You go to the next slide. A key project for us with the Whole Valley Road program, I mentioned that we're going to be meeting all services coming together at Merced. Well, ACE and the high-speed rail are both along the UP corridor. High-speed rail is adjacent to ACE, is actually in the corridor using the right-of-way using UP track.
Gonna pause this for a minute. There's a train.
With San Joaquin's, we're on the BNSF. We need this project that we call MIDSI, the Merced Intermodal Track Connection, to bring San Joaquin's from the BNSF over to the UP corridor, and then to be able to connect in the high-speed rail station platform to platform. So the high-speed rail station is elevated. We need to be elevated, but not just to meet the high-speed rail station. We also need to be elevated to get up and over the UP tracks and the UP corridor, and then work our way back down the grade to connect with the BNSF. So this is a pretty major project. In addition, we need to be able to connect in and expand the labor and maintenance facility that is being planned as part of the ACE work as well. So it's a pretty significant project. We are in the midst of the environmental. We have a draft environmental document which has been released. We held our public meeting on the draft on August 1st. Comments on the draft are due at the end of this month. And so we are moving forward with that. And then the next steps for this, once we get further in the environmental clearance, will be to start looking to get funding for this very important project as well. Next slide. Andy already kind of mentioned the stock and diamond grade separation. I won't go into too much detail. This is a key project that we're working on. Construction is looking to start next year, but a key part of that is the grant applications that Andy's been working on to be able to make sure that this is a fully funded project. Again, he mentioned that the TIRSIP application, the 55 million, we're quite confident that we're going to be successful there. And he's done a couple other grants. Again, we think we're in a very good position on. And again, wanted to just appreciate this group's support for these applications, for these important projects. Go to the next slide. I just want to kind of finish up on sort of a key planning activity that we've been doing with our agency in the Valley. This is really San Joaquin Valley focus. Some of you in the North State or in Southern California may not be so familiar, but whereas, I mean, the Bay Area, Southern California, and LA and San Diego regions and Sacramento all have these metropolitan planning organizations that cover multiple counties. In the Valley, we don't have that. Each Valley county, the 8 counties, all have their own regional transportation planning authorities. And so in order to be able to work collectively together for issues that cross county boundaries, the San Joaquin Valley has a group called the San Joaquin Valley Regional Policy Council, which includes all the 8 RTPAs. Our agency, the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, over the last couple of years became a formal member of this group, as well as the Air Control Board for the Valley is also a full member. And we've been increasing our role with this policy council and wanting to help further improve the advocacy and lobbying for public transportation, not just rail, but transit services as well. Working with the rest of the policy council, we created a new working group within the policy council that's focused on passenger rail, transit, and land use. And our agency is the lead for this. And Andy mentioned we were successful in getting a planning grant for this group to help support it. That work won't start till next year. But in the meantime, we were able to get High Speed Rail Authority to help put some funding with us to do some initial products. So I have a handout for you, and I think Renee sent it to the group who's online. But this is our first product. This helps give a vision for what's being planned, not just high-speed rail and our Valley Rail, but other rail and major improvements in terms of intercity bus services as well that provide connectivity to future high-speed rail in the Valley. And then on the backside, it kind of gives a little bit of an explanation for these various projects. This is just the first piece, but the San Joaquin Valley Policy Council does do annual lobby days in Washington, D.C. and in Sacramento. And this piece will be used at the upcoming federal lobby day. We are working on a second piece, which will be much more specific. It'll have a single page for each county. And so we'll get into more details about what's being planned for each county. And then in addition on the county-wide piece, it will not only show rail and passenger services improvements that we're looking at, planning work that's underway, but also areas for transit development. And we're focusing on that. And we do have some really good things going on. Like, for example, here in Stockton, a year or two ago, we were able to get a planning grant working with the city for doing transit development downtown. So we would sort of highlight that effort as focused on downtown Stockton. We are working to get one for Modesto as well down south, but this is something that we will be focused on in the future for this group. So this is our first piece. Certainly, we'll be looking with this group as well to share with you as we do the next ones, which are more detailed, and get your input on those. But those we hope to have those completed by the end of the year, so they're ready for the state lobby efforts, which come in the early part of next year. And so this is something we're excited about, but the idea here is to kind of help bring attention to all this happening within the Valley and hopefully help us get more funding to actually implement these programs. Any questions? That was my last slide. So any questions?
Are there any questions?
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
So, well, I'll start with this one. So in this document, is it public facing yet? And if it is,
Yeah,
what would the public feel?
it is. We're getting there. We've kind of done a soft launch so far, but we will get this up on our website and other websites for our partner agencies. You can see all the logos on the bottom.
Yeah.
But in addition, we will be working with the Policy Council to get a special web page for this new working group. That might take a little bit longer, but we should be able to get this up on our website very soon. But it's been sent to you, so you're welcome to use it. It's going to be a bit of a living document too, so it may change as things change. We'll update it from time to time. But this, yeah, you can use this. This is good. All the agencies below have approved us going out using it.
Is there a press release that goes with this or?
Not yet. We haven't thought to go that far. That's something we have. I mean, we didn't think about doing that yet. I mean, for us, our primary purpose first was that we have a federal lobby day for the Policy Council that's coming up next month. And so this is in the packet for the federal lobby day. But we will be working on how to continue to promote this, and especially as we get the next product too, which provides more detail for each county. And so that's by the end of the year. So our focus right now is to get that next piece going too, and to get the web page for the Policy Council up as soon as we can.
Okay, yeah, I think that anything that we can do, because we do get questions about the high-speed rail and then how's that gonna work out? I do, and so I think that this would be helpful, and then if it, came along with something, because it's a milestone,
Yes.
right, and it's a big deal. And so then it shows like work in progress
Yes.
with our community members, I think that would be really important. And then I guess that goes to my other point, in terms of the milestones, like Lathrop and that announcement, I believe there was a press release.
Yes, there was.
I don't know if there's like, we can point people to, you're gonna have the webpage, so we'll be able to point them to that. But like, anything that's in the current like newsletter or anything like that, so that we can also blast that out on
Right.
social media, because I think that that would be important as far as like with the milestones. And then the other thing that I wanted to ask was, in this, high speed, integration and everything that's moving forward. And it's really exciting because it's taken such a long time, but is like, in terms of the outreach piece of it, besides the agencies themselves and you all doing that, is there gonna be opportunity for like community-based organizations to come in and do outreach within the context of those communities? And is there gonna be an RFP process or anything like that?
Yeah, great question. That's actually a requirement as part of the grant that we got with the state. So that effort will get underway next year, and this will grow over time. This is just the beginning. This effort will grow over time. And we expect this committee, this working group to be around for a long time. I mean, we expect this to be around for years. I mean, the passenger rail transit will only be increasing over the years to come. And so this will be something that we expect to be around for quite some time. We were able, again, high-speed rail paid for these, which is great. And then this current effort that we're doing. And so we do want to make sure that they also put this on their website too, because there's a lot of folks that get confused about wondering, how people get, once you get to Merced or Bakersfield, how do you get to other locations? And this helps show that the investment in high-speed rail is being invested, that actually we're going to be very well connected in the valley to other locations. So that they are a key partner in this effort, and we will continue to work with them. But once we get that next effort going, there will be very much so public outreach portions working with communities as part of that effort. That's part of the application that we were awarded.
Thank you.
Questions online?
Okay, so this is Hank Fung from LA County again. So your schedule, so the MITC, you're doing environmental now. You do anticipate to open that connection when high-speed rail opens in 2030, and also the Madera station relocation. I understand they're not going to be operating simultaneously, high-speed rail in San Joaquin. So the station moves and the San Joaquin platform opens until that service is then replaced in favor of high-speed rail on the other tracks. And then when is that the new Madera station going to open?
It's right now, the date is 2026 to open the relocated station. But that station is actually a three-phase effort, where phase one is for us to relocate the station to the location along Avenue 12. Phase two is to do the implementation of improvements needed in order to have Madera be able to open as a high-speed rail station once early operations begin. And then phase three is actually an additions to that high-speed rail station to enable it to become a full build station for when high-speed rail extends to the Bay Area or Southern California. So it's really in three phases. The first phase is fully funded, and we're expecting to start construction soon. The second phase, we have $80 million secured. We have requested the funds through various grant applications for the remaining funds, about $54 million, to complete phase two. And then that is expected to be done by the time high-speed rail operates, which again is the time frame. He said 2030 is 2030 to 2033. We're not sure exactly when the start period would be. And then phase three is that when we do the phase one, it includes only one platform on the east side. Phase three would have an additional platform on the west side and additional stopping track that's required, and a pedestrian overcrossing to connect them. We're right now doing the environmental work for that phase 3. We've cleared the environmental for both phase 1 and phase 2. And
Okay,
phase 3 is only needed if high-speed rail extends either to the Bay Area or Southern California.
okay. And then the MITC, that opens with
It's-
rail.
Yeah, sorry, that Mitzi would need to, as you noted, the goal would be to have that open on day 1 when high-speed rail gets to Merced, which is between 2030 and 2033.
Okay, and then so even though the environmental, you're still in the draft environmental document phase, you're still you still expect to meet that. So day 1, the high-speed rail folks can transfer and then get around Northern California.
That is our plan.
Okay, thank you.
Hour zone, am I gonna get a ticket?
We'll make sure you don't. Yeah, yeah, so you're good. Yeah.
Any other questions online? I have just a couple. I know this diamond grade has been such a huge thing, so congratulations on getting all the funding for that. The question I have is, so depending on where you live within the valley, there's a kind of a dearth of airports. And so one of the more difficult things is getting from a train station to an airport. And so I just want to make a comment. I talked about Sacramento. I do a lot of travel with work. Fresno is my other place, and I would prefer to go to the Fresno airport, but that has been actually even more difficult to get from the Fresno station to the airport. And I'm just putting this in, I know this may be down the line, but to think through either what you've done with Turlock in getting the integration with their busing system to get students to Stanislaus, CSU Stanislaus has been a really great thing that I've noticed a lot. And I'm just wondering if there is a way that we can have some kind of integration between the Fresno, what is current, the Amtrak station, or the future high-speed rail station to the airport to get that integration.
Yes, and while that's a problem with this level of detail, where this is good for something, this is good to kind of give people a big snapshot. That's why we need to also have the one pager that brings it into more detail for each county. And so we will have one for Fresno, and that will show connection from the rail station, particularly high-speed rail, to the airport, as well as they're planning some future light rail as well. And so that will be absolutely part of that. And we are coordinating with the council of governments there in the city to make sure that that coordination is done.
Yeah, and even if there's something in the interim, so like I have to walk about 7 blocks to get to the bus station to go, because I'm really dedicated and not using a car. Now, that's just my kind of my shtick, but I know, like, obviously we can use Uber and Lyft and all those things. If there was a way of even in the interim, providing some spaces, that would eliminate some of the time in transit that I have to account for. What should be an hour and a half-ish to get to the airport becomes I have to always give a 3-hour lead. And so that becomes prohibitive for people who are not dedicated like I am. And I know I'm unique in that. So anyway, I would like to see more integration.
Great comment.
Are there any other questions before we move on? All right, item 8. Oh, did I hear something? No, okay. Item 8, update on the Federal Railroad Administration Long Distance Service Study.
Yeah, this is Andy Cook again. I'll be presenting this item. Let's see. Yeah, I'll be presenting an update on the FRA's long distance service study. This is a report that was requested by the committee at a previous meeting. The FRA has been conducting this study over the past year and a half. It's kicked off in early 2023, and it basically just concluded with a national meeting this past June. So I'll be providing some details on the study and what the recommendations are. Next slide, please. So the FRA was required to prepare the long distance service study based on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And the study was focused on evaluating any Amtrak long distance routes that were discontinued in the past, any Amtrak long distance routes that occur on a non-daily basis, and then evaluation of potential new Amtrak long distance routes, including.
Just 1 minute, just a minute. Okay, continue on.
Okay, and then lastly, potential new long distance routes with specific attention provided to routes in service as of April 1971, but not continued by Amtrak. So the scope of this was really focused on restoring, service that had existed in the past that had been cut over time. And this was a requirement of the Federal Infrastructure Act. Next slide, please. Routes that are evaluated as part of the study are evaluated based on criteria tied to legislative considerations for long distance service, including linking and serving large and small communities as part of a regional rail network, advancing the economic and social well-being of rural areas of the United States, providing enhanced connectivity for the national long distance passenger rail system, and then reflecting public engagement and local and regional support of restored passenger rail service. Next slide, please. The FRA convened a series of regional meetings and invited stakeholders from different regions to provide input on potential long distance routes based on the parameters established in the infrastructure law for the long distance study. California was included in a regional Southwest group that included Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and I believe Utah to work through a series of 4 meetings, which just concluded with the last of the 4 meetings this past June to evaluate different route options. And the proposed network of preferred routes in the study is presented here. Next slide, please. So the Southwest Regional Group evaluated different routes, including restoration of service that I think had existed in the past on the BNSF, formerly the Santa Fe route between Dallas and California and San Francisco in particular. They evaluated different route options, but narrowed in on a preferred long distance concept that connected the major population centers in this long distance corridor. And most significantly provided a direct long distance connection to Phoenix, which is important for ridership. Next slide, please. The evaluation criteria used to identify a preferred route between California and Texas, which is relevant to the San Joaquin corridor, is outlined here. Included evaluation of access considerations, the percentage of total route miles that include miles that were discontinued, stakeholder input, travel demand, again, access, including access to rural areas and tribal lands. And the preferred route that was selected for the long distance study is illustrated here, which provide a direct connection between Texas cities, Phoenix, and then San Francisco via the Tehachapi route. So coordination with host railroads was explicitly excluded as a criteria for evaluating potential long distance routes as part of the study. And that's why this particular alignment was selected. The host railroads are adamantly opposed to any passenger service on the Tehachapi route between Bakersfield and Barstow. That's why we have a bus connection between Bakersfield and Los Angeles currently for the San Joaquin corridor. But based on the study's parameters and evaluation criteria, this was the preferred route that was selected, which would provide service on the San Joaquin corridor. Next slide, please. Some detail on the communities that would be served in this concept are illustrated here. This long distance route concept would serve Bakersfield, Hanford, Fresno, Merced, and Stockton, and then terminate in, I believe, Emeryville with a connecting bus service to San Francisco. Next slide, please. This was also selected because it significantly reduces the travel time on long distance service between California and Dallas relative to the long distance services that are operated now primarily between Los Angeles and San Antonio, which require, transfers between bus services or other long distance services to get to Dallas. So it's another consideration in selecting a long distance route improvement. That's all I have. Again, what was recommended in the study represents route concepts. They does not represent a FRA proposal for new service. Implementation of this service would require identification of a project sponsor, project sponsors for this long distance corridor. And then this would have to advance through the FRA's really well-defined service planning and project development process. Conceptual costs were included in the study. Capital costs associated with implementing this are upwards of $3.5 billion. And operations and maintenance costs are on a range, with the upper end of that range being about $130 million a year. So that's a significant undertaking. It requires coordination with the host railroads to implement, which have been opposed to this this kind of service and passenger rail service over the Tehachapi corridor in the past. So at this time, these are really just recommended route concepts, but the path for implementing this it's really unclear. And that concludes my report. So I'm happy to take questions from the committee.
I really love that there's no bus service. That really, having taken that route quite a bit, there's some real potentials for development. This would be a different train service than what are currently the San Joaquin cars. Is that correct? Am I understanding that? I know
Yeah.
we're way out. We're like 50 years out, I know. But it would be a different service on the same tracks. Is that correct?
Yeah. This is assumed to be a once daily Amtrak long distance service that would run on the same corridor.
Okay, so it would be like the Starlight goes through multiple states, that kind of idea.
Yeah, it'd be the same kind of service, similar to the Starlight or the Sunset, Southern California. California Zephyr kind of service.
Okay. Are there any other questions? All right, seeing none, I know this has been a long meeting, so we have just one more thing. Item 9, discussion on improving the San Joaquin's rail and bus service. So this I'm reading. I know that I was not here at the last meeting, and so I have a list of what you talked about last time, but this is our opportunity to just speak to either personal experiences or perceptions or what we've heard from people. I just was talking to someone yesterday who's been using taking BART to Richmond and then coming over on the San Joaquin, and so her perceptions of it. So I'm going to open this up to discussion. If there's anyone, or if we're too tired and we can share.
So this is
Yes.
Hank Fung. I just want to kind of mention, I know we've kind of beaten the whole venture card food thing to death, but there definitely does need to be, if it's not on the cars, then definitely at the junction points or the break points, because the trains still have a crew change in Merced, and then Bakersfield is a place where there's transfers. And, near the Bakersfield station, there isn't really a lot of, food opportunities within walking distance. So anything those station managers can do to, either bring taco trucks or even like, more robust vending machines, just to provide options for people. I mean, generally speaking, people go on those trips, I think do end up, buying sandwiches or food before they get on, but it's just something to consider.
That's a really good point. I've sat at that Bakersfield station because my train's been late for 7 hours. So food options are something, because it just happened to be lots of perfect storms of things happened that day. Yeah, good suggestion. Are there any other comments that we haven't already had?
Well, I'll expound on that point. Typically, I take a long distance trip to Chicago, obviously long distance, Chicago once a year. I didn't do it this year. Last year I came back and the connection point between the Zephyr and the San Joaquin is now in Martinez, which is, I like a lot better. However, there's no food options there. So vending machine. And I grabbed a bag of chips thinking that, you know, forgetting likely there wasn't gonna be any food on board, and it was comment set. And asked where the counter was or cafe, we don't have one. But there's snacks in the car in front on the luggage rack. So I went up there was a box of trail mix in a cardboard box that had not been opened, and a case of water that had not been opened. And very disappointing and very uncomfortable to ride it. We've got you ride in full route down to Bakersfield. You know, without any food options, it's not a pleasant experience at all. I know we now have the snacks and the comments have been retired, correct?
The comments have been retired?
They're on their way to full retirement. I'm not sure if they're still coming in every once in a while when needed, but they're pretty much on their way out.
And so, but now the venture cars, you do have a few snack options. People are being put out for free.
Yeah, that's what David said.
Sure.
Yeah.
Even so, it was, you know, unpleasant, you know, not having had anything to eat since noon on the Zephyr. And then, not till 9 o'clock at night or 8 something, getting into Madera without food. Put the bag of chips. I hate to be the one complaining about it. But
Yeah. Yeah, and like at the Sacramento station, there's
that's
the,
nice. You've got
yeah,
a
you
little
have the-
bistro there, and
Right.
that was always nice experience.
yeah, and Los Angeles, yeah. And the Zephyr can have an on-time performance that's less than beautiful. And so there are times where I've actually been on the Zephyr and they ran out of food because we were so behind. And so by the time we got, at that time, I didn't go to Martinez, it was Sacramento. By the time we got there, it had been quite a long time since there was food. So that is something to take into consideration. Very, very well. Okay. And when I have tried to eat at Martinez, we had to walk quite a ways to go and grab breakfast the one time.
Well, if I know my option was gonna be a
Yeah.
bag of trail mix and a bottle of water, I would have ventured out. But I
Right.
figured I'd wait and get on board.
Right, and it wasn't real close. It wasn't within, you know.
A couple hours later.
Yeah,
It
no.
was on time.
Yeah, I'm glad it was on time. Yeah, there was flooding in Iowa. It was a bad situation, but, that being said, without the other options, if you're coming into the state, that would make a lot of sense.
Hidden, is there any possibility, so you have this little snacks on board now, then you'll have in certain cars, correct, the vending machines. But in those locations where there isn't anything available, like Sacramento and Los Angeles, and then Los Angeles closes at a certain time because they have limited hours also for the restaurants that are inside. But they do have a lot of options, right? I mean, it's Union Station. Is if like a vendor that you would have a request, you know, so that they would go through the status of being a vendor, could come in from the outside, you know, where they have either like their truck or a little cart or something. Yeah, just a portable one that's not necessarily stationed right in the station itself, but because they would know when the trains are arriving and leaving or what have you. And then if there was a contract, then that would make the experience better, right? Because then otherwise we're like the airlines, right? Where you bring your food online onto your, now they don't have the food anymore, right? You could buy it beforehand. That might be another option in terms of increasing revenue if you could buy things ahead of time. But in this case, if we had approved vendors, that were there, like, you know, in the parking lot or what have you, at those hours. And because they're approved, you would know what it is. You would know even what the food is, because a lot of them have it, so you have it on your app. So you know, oh, okay, to your point, I can get a breakfast burrito, it's breakfast time, or I can get this or that. And there's all these approved vendors that have their own little carts, doesn't even have to be a full-blown truck, you know, there's like smaller ones they have for the coffee or anything like that. And so then this would increase ridership, I think, because now these vendors know, okay, this is how this works, this is how this exists. And so then, you know, that would, on that end of it, and then also working with all of these small businesses throughout the whole entire, you know, rail region, you know, bringing them as approved vendors and then doing that. And that, I think, would make it more pleasant, like you said, to that point. And then, especially if you have kids and everything else, or, you know, folks that have different like restrictions and diet. And that's just the thought as you all were speaking about that in terms of that. And then also, I don't know if, were you done or?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
In terms of the EV chargers, if there's availability for that, you know, especially in the areas where people are commuting. I don't know if there's anything like that that's available. I know that for the park, there are like the EV chargers that are available at the stations. And so I think that's another area, especially for people that are doing business or commuting. That was a thought process that went through my head this morning because I was coming here. Like, is there an EV charger there? I don't remember. But I think that's another thing that would add in terms of improving the service itself, because that's improving the experience. And then on that last mile traveled, we do have like an Uber piece to that. But did we ever like have anything that had to do with like the different rideshare like programs that are through the electric vehicles?
I don't believe we have any formal agreements with any of the rideshare providers. That's something that we'd have to look into.
Yeah, so when I connected with Marcus, the marketing manager, to talk about the travel trainers, we're also exploring a relationship partnership with Uber through our partnership with Levi Stadium to offer some kind of option for those that want to connect at the Santa Clara A station versus at the Great America station. So I'll include that in the email communication so you can describe the current workings with rideshare partners.
Yeah, okay, because the travel trainers, I think, would be key to help with experience and with like the whole outreach, getting people there. I think if we, that there was a way to get funding for them, whatever that funding looks like for the locations that do have them, I would be interested in seeing how that works or what they do. Because I think if we had that in more than one language, that would be really great. They're like ambassadors, right, for the service. And that would be something that I think would be very key as far as moving forward. Also, the videos that you said that help with the ticketing and what have you, even if it wasn't like a full blown, you know, video, you could either do an animation one. But the other thing that is working for us, like I serve on the EJAG for the Air District, and then we also help them with outreach, is that they have these videos on in terms of Spanish and English TV, right? So the announcements, and then they show like, oh, this incentive program, I, you know, turned in my tractor, right? Turned in my incentive programs like that, you know, with the fireplace replacement. And in this case, like, oh, you know, I went to Santa Cruz and did this, you know, I talked to Renee about, you know, doing this. So as ourselves, like, you know, we could promote that like online, but these are people in the community. So they know they're on that commercial. So then they'll tell their friends and family, like, hey, I'm on the commercial. This is how this went about. So for folks that, you know, have experienced that, you know, maybe for the first time, and those that have been using the system for a while, so maybe like a commuter, somebody who does it for pleasure, you know, what have you. And then in both languages, I think would be really key. Because as whatever you're doing in terms of like the outreach dollars, and especially when they see themselves on television and then on social media, because then we can all share that. And those are real people that are using the system, students, what have you, kind of looking at like a cross-pollination, and that's what we're doing right now, of like the demographic. So that way they could see, senior, young people, and so it's like everybody rides the train. And then they're seeing themselves. So if you look at the videos that they have from the Air District, they're really like, concise, nice, it tells about the program, and that's been helpful, and so we're going to expand on that.
Yes, so in the email communication with Marcus, I'll also include the topic of our ambassador program for ACE and the San Joaquins as well too. Maybe you can send us some nominations or know someone that might be interested.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
How is that funded in the Bay Area? Do we know how they fund
Ambassador program, it's just a tactic in the marketing department just to encourage
that?
folks.
It is a budget item.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's part of the marketing.
okay, perfect, all right. Yeah.
What are the ones for the, dam?
Oh, like the
Docents.
docents.
Yeah.
Kind of like.
So it's like the distance, right, from the museum for rail.
So it's just kind of a political will of putting that into the budget. Yeah, okay. All right, are there any other comments? I think food is really important. Trauma on the trains. Is there anyone online who has something that they would like to add? Comments or voices? All right, with that, I think we're going to adjourn the next meeting. Before we adjourn, the next meeting is scheduled for February 21st, 2025, and that will be a hybrid meeting also at this point, or
At the moment, yes.
in-person and online. Perfect. All right. We'll call this to adjournment.
Thank you. Nice job.
Thank you all.
It's office, so those things. I love it. And then it's just like.